Cycling jerseys have come a long way since the scratchy wool days of the 80s, or have they? Today I want to talk about merino because I had some questions like how can it stay warm in the cool but then cool in the warm, and why is it all of a sudden making a comeback in cycling kit? I'm going to answer all of these and more in a bit of a deep dive, so if you're interested, stick with me. Also, huge thanks to Balf Bikes for sending me 2 base layers from Rafa, one in merino and one in synthetic, so I can show you some of the physical differences later on. But this is not a review, this is just a demystifying video. So let's get started with some facts. Now, the merino sheep. Sheep, merino sheep, merino sheep, merino sheep, average sheep, sheep. Not that that's really important, but it's interesting to say. Merino comes from, well, you guessed it, sheep. But merino is a type of breed of sheep. Now, it's a European sheep, but it was brought over to Australia by settlers, and now it can mostly be found in Tasmania. This isn't important, but what's important is the merino breed has much finer, lightweight fibers in its wool than a traditional sheep. In fact, the fibers in its wool are about 1/3 the thickness of human hair. Can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? Nope, because it's really, really fine. So here's the nerd stuff, because wool is made of coarse fibers. If you want to be specific, it's often over 30 microns in diameter, whereas merino wool is typically 17 to 24 microns in diameter, so potentially half the width. These fine fibers allow wool to trap small air pockets between the fibers, and these air pockets act like insulation, keeping you warm in cool weather. So what have we learned? That fibers in merino jerseys can vary in thickness, and that will affect the performance and the warmth of the jersey, so no one merino jersey is the same. But also polyester jerseys can be made with fibers from 10 to 30 microns as well, if you want to be really specific, so no one polyester jersey is the same either. So what have we learned? Probably nothing here, but there are some actual real reasons why you might want to choose one over the other. So big thanks to Balf Bikes for providing me with 2 pretty much identical base layers so I can explain the differences a little better. So these are both made by Rafa, so same brand, same intended use, same price actually, but they do feel quite different. So this is the polyester version, and it feels kind of shiny. It's kind of like when you touch Lycra, and that feels kind of shiny. Whereas when you touch the merino base layer, it's kind of soft and a little bit more muted, a bit like when you touch a cotton t-shirt. The weight is actually slightly different as well. And Rafa have obviously been able to create a slightly different pattern with the polyester fabrics. There's a slight paneling down the side. You can be a little bit more complex when using the man-made fibers. One of my favorite properties of merino is that it's antimicrobial. That's really hard to say, but basically it means that bacteria doesn't build up on it, which means odor doesn't build up on it either. Because let's be honest, some synthetic fabrics can get a little bit funky, a little bit funky, a little bit funky. Funky, 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 stinks. Seriously, I've sweated in merino hard and then thrown it on the floor and picked it up the next day, and it just kind of smells like nothing. It smells bland, whereas I know my Lycra stinks. Sorry, but it just does. So merino is fantastic for multi-day trips or bike packing where laundry just isn't an option. You can wear it multiple times. And the big one, merino is sustainable. You grow a sheep, you shave a sheep, the wool grows back. It's a renewable fiber. And also it's biodegradable, which means no microplastics in the water when you wash it. And if it ends up in landfill, well, it will just break down. So no guilt there either. And if you're a super eco warrior, well, you don't have to wash it as often. So that's saving on water and energy as well. Okay, so we can all probably understand why wool is warm and keeps you warm in the cold, because the fibers trap pockets of air which act like insulation and keep you warm. Now, merino fibers are slightly finer, which means that excess heat can escape more easily. But the really interesting thing about merino is that it can absorb 30% of its own weight in water before you even start to feel damp. That's crazy. So what this means in reality is that it can absorb your sweat, leaving you feeling drier, but then the excess heat can still evaporate, which means you should feel drier and cooler in hotter temperatures. Okay, this is starting to sound a bit like a merino advert here. There's definitely some benefits to merino, but there's also some non-benefits that might make you want to choose polyester. So let me go over those now. Oh my days. Okay, the first big disadvantage to merino is it's often more expensive. Now, Rafa are kind of proving me wrong here because they've offered 2 base layers in the 2 different materials at the same price. But it's much easier to find a cheap polyester base layer or polyester jersey than it is to find a cheap merino base layer or jersey. And that's just because merino wool is scarce, it's more labor intensive, so therefore it's going to be more expensive than a man-made fiber like polyester, which is quite abundant and easy to get hold of and easy to make. But there's one disadvantage that's a hugie for me. Remember when I told you that merino can absorb 30% of its weight in moisture? That's great when you're sweating it out in the warmth, but what about when it rains? The problem with merino wool is that it does hold on to that moisture. It doesn't dry out as quickly as polyester. Imagine yourself out in the mountains in your merino jersey. You're soaked through and the wind is blowing. This is when wind chill increases as a risk factor. It's when hypothermia might even set in if you spend too long in that cold. Polyester will dry a lot quicker under those conditions than merino. So the whole warm when wet theory is definitely true, but I wouldn't want to be sustained in damp clothing. Polyester is definitely good for that. Also, merino, having its fine fibers, means it can wear out quicker than polyester, potentially. And even though these 2 base layers require a wash on a 30-degree cycle, the merino has to be washed on a gentle cycle, and it needs to be with a gentle wool-oriented fabric washing liquid as well. So for some of you out there, that might be a hassle, and that might be enough of a negative to stick with polyester. People often ask me, what's better? What bike is better? What clothing is better? Is polyester better than merino or the other way around? And the answer to every question is always, well, it depends. It depends what you're using it for and what you need it for. So there's the facts. It's wool, but expensive wool, with some good points and some bad points. Look, if you live in a mild climate, then a high-grade, lightweight performance merino jersey is probably really good for you. If you live in a cold climate and it's quite dry, then actually the cheaper, coarser stuff, the thicker stuff, is going to be really good for you. I can't tell you how much warmer it is compared to the synthetic stuff. But if there is any risk of rain at all, I will always reach for the polyester. It's just better when it comes to drying out. That's my personal opinion. But if you have experience with merino, then let me know down in the comments below. I want to know what you think. Have you had the same experience as me with getting caught out in the rain in merino? Do you live in a mild or warm climate and use merino? Is it actually quite cooling? I want to know. Help out our future community so that they can go into the comments and get your advice too.